Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Millar-Carter from the University of South Florida, and I'm serving as the chair of this workshop. I will also serve as moderator for part of this plenary and then pass it over to Jay Perlman, who will take over in about 2 hours. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the conference committee team. They've done a lot of work for many, many weeks. And this includes Jay Perlman, who's the co-chair of OBPS, Paul Van Ruth, of IMOS in Australia, serving as the program chair, Pauline Simpson, Eileen Tan, Ben Roberts, many, many others. I would like to also acknowledge our sponsors. That includes the Ocean Ops Research Coordination Network, sponsored by the National Science Foundation in the US, the Global Ocean Observing System, and IODE, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. But welcome to the 6th workshop of the Ocean Best Practices System, or what we call OBPS. The OBPS is a project of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, or IOC. It's a global project sponsored jointly by the Global Ocean Observing System, again, GOOS, and the International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange, or IODE, both within the IOC. And the intent is to support ocean communities engaged in observation, data analysis, and applications. Now, this workshop has a couple goals that are very fundamental in what we're all trying to do in ocean science and ocean applications. And that is the development of best practices, or what we call BP, to promote the documentation and to share them widely. And one of the mechanisms that we offer is the Ocean Best Practices System. So you'll learn about the OBPS in this plenary and how you use it. This plenary will set the tone for activities that you have organized for your individual sessions over the next 2 weeks. And then there will be a closing set of plenaries on October 19th at the same time as this plenary and one that we had earlier today. So now I'm pleased to introduce Ben Roberts, who's our technical support lead for the workshop. He will show you how you can ask for help. And at the end of the session, Ben will come back and offer an introduction to this Kiko Chat platform that we're using, that is the home for this workshop, and also a calendar that's called a Team Up calendar that is our guide to what is going to happen. So Ben, please.
Thanks so much, Frank, and hello, everybody. Welcome to the workshop. I'm really delighted and honored to be supporting all of your technical needs for the next 2 weeks. I just dropped a link in the chat for our main tech support document, which is linked to on the Ocean Best Practices website, I believe in some of your confirmation emails, and also in the Kiko Chat platform. And the main thing there, it shows you how to get onto Kiko Chat if you're having any issues with that, and also how to contact me, as well as Joe Mann, who is assisting. And our primary suggestion is that you use the WhatsApp channel that we've created for tech help. I'm going to be hanging out also on this Zoom line in the main room or the plenary room from time to time throughout the workshop. So if you ever see me there with the red video icon on, that usually means somebody's actually on video in that room. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lag or it hangs on after someone leaves, but feel free if you see me around to drop in and say hi, ask any questions. I'm also co-hosting all of the workshop cafes, which I strongly encourage you to join as a way to continue the conversation that you're having in your theme sessions, to cross-pollinate among those theme sessions, and to network with one another and with the OBPS team. So as Frank mentioned at the end of the call, we're going to do a run through of all the tools in the Kiko Chat platform. So I'll see you back then. And also actually at the end of the first half of this call, we're going to do some interactive participatory kind of dialogue in breakouts. So I'll be facilitating that as well. But right now, am I going back to you, Frank, or is it Jay?
Yeah, no, I'll moderate this time. And now we will have a series of keynote speakers. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll come back for another set of keynote speakers in a panel. I want to introduce to you the first keynote speaker. That is Johannes Carstensen. He's the other co-chair of the Ocean Best Practices System, and he's at Geomar. And then we'll hear about Paul Van Ruth, who's a senior science officer of the Australian Integrated Marine Observing System, or IMOS, which is also part of GOOS. So Johannes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank, and also thank you very, very much for the pleasure of providing you an overview about the ocean best practices system, how it came about, and yeah, where we are. And I believe you will see now the round. Is it? You see the presenter's mode, right? Is it okay now?
We don't say anything.
You don't see
apart
it?
from you. No,
Oh, we see you. We see.
we see you. Yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah. Wait a second. So next try. Now the
Yes.
presenter mode.
Awesome. Yeah. It's all good. We see the slide.
Good. Okay. So yeah, my name is Jonas Carstensen. I'm at GeoMod. I'm the co-chair of the Ocean Best Practices system. Before I really go into the system, I would like to introduce you what we at the Ocean Best Practices kind of system people consider a best practice, because it's very important to first really define this term. So what we think is a best practice, and we operate in that space, is that a best practice is a methodology that has repeatedly produced superior results relative to other methodologies which have the same objective. And this is only one part of it, because it also goes then hand in hand with it, that to be really a best practice, to be fully elevated to that, such a promising methodology will have to be reviewed, adapted, employed by multiple organizations. So best practices actually have a lot to do with communities and with working together as communities. And you do that then for the community, in fact. Why should one use best practices? Actually, best practice will enable you and will enable the practitioners that apply them to really efficiently make use of their time, because you do things in the right way that is actually representing the current state of knowledge. It provides collaborative opportunities, because best practices, as I said, are really the result of collaboration of communities. It will have improvement of systems interoperability, because best practices really support interoperability by providing the current state of knowledge on a certain practice. And that goes along then with data comparability and colatability. It will automatically then create greater trust in the data, because people know how you actually produce certain data. And automatically then also comes that it streamlines regulatory approval of certain practices. And because of all these positive things, it really will also ensure best practices, the use of best practices, that you have a higher funding success of the work, and also things that are based on, say, data creation through the use of best practices. So what is now this Ocean Best Practices system? It is an international project that is supported by the IOC, by the Intergovernmental Oceanic Commission. And we are co-sponsored by the IODE and the International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange, IOD, and the GOOS, the Global Ocean Observing System. The vision we have is to have agreed and broadly adapted methods across all ocean research, operations, and applications. And we differentiate in 4 different capacities originally, which is that we have a repository, the OBPS repository, I come to that. We have a journal, we have activities related to training, and then we provide user support. And we now, over the time, we also have created new capacities, which are task teams that take on specific activities. We have a very engaged and very early career ocean practitioners ambassador program. Come to that. International annual workshops. You are sitting in one. And we have also Ocean Practices, which is a UN Decade of the Ocean Science for Sustainable Development program. A little bit on the history. OBPS actually came out of in 2014 because of the installment of the IODE repository, and that was in parallel to a big European project that's currently now a program, actually, which is Atlantos, that provided funding. In 2016, we established the best practices working group, and also in early 2017, our website. At the end of 2017, we had the first workshop in Paris, and also started the journal, the research topic. I come to that later. In 2019, then really the OBPS system, the project, IOC project, was approved by IOC and also co-sponsored by IVA groups. A very important milestone was also the Ocean Ops community paper that was presented in 2019 at the end, and then the UN Decade Program. Coming to the repository. The repository is, and that's really important, is a permanent repository cited at the IODE in Ostend. So it actually has two parts. Currently, we have about 1,720 entries in the repository. And these entries can be searched up with a certain machinery. And then also you can submit practices, methodologies, whatever, to this repository. And we help you with that. So coming first to the submission process, there's a certain web address here of our web space that allows submission. And we asked for submission of whatever practices you can think of. It can be really a very local, a very individual practice, a manual, a standard operation procedure, guidelines, standards. You have journal articles that really relate to best practices or to methodologies, and also video material, for example, training videos. We also have full text search with metadata to get a permanent open access archive of whatever is in the repository hosted by IOD. There is a rich metadata collection, and this is not only bibliographic, but a lot of different types of metadata. And that also goes hand in hand with complex machinery, actually, that uses automatic semantic indexing. So what that means is that we have machinery running that harvests the full text that's being uploaded and metadata that comes with it against vocabularies, certain authorized vocabularies, like CDNet, CVOX, whatever vocabularies. And that gives a new collection of metadata. The other part of these repositories is a search functionality, like, you know, for example, from Google. But in this case, it really is specifically for our repository, and therefore it's specifically for best practices related material. And it has many different capabilities, this search functionality. You can search for keywords, of course, and then you can further narrow down the search in order to arrive at what you are specifically interested in. We also want to understand, to know how we do. What are the needs? How is the user, how are our providers actually responding to what we think from the community, with from the dialogue with the community. And we have certain metrics like how many documents have been uploaded, what type of document have been uploaded. And then, of course, we are interested in where sit people that provide us material, where are the users of this material. And you can see from the maps, I don't want to go into the details here, but you can see from the map that there's really a nearly global participation, at least from the user side, not necessarily from the provider side. And we really would like to see more, you know, even your personal, whatever, best practice related material being published here. Then we have the journal, which is a so-called research topic in the frontiers in marine science. It's called Best Practices in Ocean Observing, and it is an open-ended research theme at the moment. There are discounted open access rates to publish material here. We have a broad audience to share data quality and practices and information through this journal. At this stage, we have 43 articles being published, 7 actually are in review. And you can see from the graph on the side that we have about 340,000 views on these articles since 2016 and many thousands of downloads. From the training and capacity development side, what is a real important activity, recent activity, is that we operate in collaboration with Ocean Teachers Global Academy, or TGA, also an IODE supported activity. Specific video productions that explain really what is an ocean best practice, what is a best practice, how to create a best practice, and also how to search for and submit methodologies. And more to come. Then we have activities in the user support and outreach part. So one very important organ that actually connects us to the community is a so-called newsflash, the good, better, and best newsflash. And here we aim to inform the ocean practices community about latest developments. We also provide here a platform for opportunities to promote methods or information to a diverse international audience. We always love to receive contributions that we can publish in our newsflash. We have more than 500 subscribers to the newsflash, so you have quite a bit of impact if you publish something in the newsflash. So please note either the email here or come later to me or to any other from the Ocean Best Practices team in order to get a subscriber of the newsflash and also contribute. Then what is outlined here in this infograph is really how to develop what we consider the normal way in developing an ocean best practices. So each of these icons are actually standing for a certain feature of the OBPS, of the Ocean Best Practice System. And you see them in the upper right: search for repository, journal, training, and user support. And we differentiate here 3 groups. For the development, one is scope and recruitment, develop and release, and revise and ratify. So typically, actually, what most people do in this sector is that they concentrate on the second stage, which is develop content and release the content, while actually 1 and 3 are those that really make the best practice, because that includes the constant revision, the constant review of these documents. It also includes bringing in a very wide user community and practitioner community in order to really arrive with the current best knowledge on a certain practice. So then I mentioned before that we have now Ocean Best Practice System task teams. Currently we have 4 established task teams. One is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The value chain, ocean observing value chain analysis and KPIs. We have an Omics eDNA task team, also well represented here on the workshop, and coastal observations and under-resourced countries, again, on the workshop. And we are currently developing a task team on decision trees. Then one very important activity from 2021 is the endorsement of the ocean practices for the decade, or short ocean practices. That is a UN decade endorsed program led by the IOC Ocean Best Practice System. And you will hear later today in the keynotes really a lot more about ocean practice decade. Then coming on to the impact really of OBPS. I showed you the map before about the uptake. No, that's a submission of ocean practices. Best practice creation and use is really something that is now being expected to be a component of most of the projects I have seen, project proposals. So really, everybody would like to harmonize methodologies and make them really community agreed on and community created activity. Active ocean practice, ocean best practice community is really an impact that I think also goes back to the OBPS. We have really a global spread of users, can we see from the map, not, but from the other map. There's training and workflow to find or develop an ocean best practices. Really a lot of activities on that sector are going on, like the videos I showed before. And support of the Goose International endorsement is another impact of ocean best practices, which is something that we executed for the Goose, the Global Ocean Observing System example, but we hope that many more organizations would follow that route and also create endorsement for their specific needs. This is an example for such an endorsement. This is a Goose example. To qualify Goose endorsed, the best practice has to fulfill some expectations which are listed here, and they are all protocoled, they are reviewed, and at the end, they are specifically highlighted, these best practices highlighted in the repository system. But we invite other organizations to also get into a dialogue with us and also create endorsed best practices for their purpose. So what is the Ocean Best Practices roadmap for the next time? Well, of course, at the end, and we are on the way to it, we would like to install a global, sustainable, and trusted hub of ocean know-how. In particular, we would like more to expand our work with developing nations, remote regions, and indigenous people, for example, in Africa, Arctic, or in the South Pacific. We would like to further motivate and focus the global conversation around best practices through us, so that we are the hub for motivating and focusing this conversation. Then, it's just said, encourage organizations to endorse what is best for them. Again, a dialogue with us is very much welcome. Harmonize metadata and the structures around it, so creating fair best practices. Then we are after really promoting a federated network of methodology management system, but behind that is that, of course, there are other best practices than ocean best practices. And the ultimate goal is that they are really interlinked by following standard vocabularies. You can really then interlink these different management systems of methodologies to create a global methodology system. And of course, synergies between best practices, which always have this kind of further development stage in it, and standards, which are really more like fixed, converge the two, synergize the two, is also one big item on our agenda. And with that, this is the team, at least part of the team, not all were present, from the last time we had a group meeting in 2019. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johannes. And now we will go to Paul van Ruth, a Senior Science Officer for the Australian Integrated Marine Observing System, or IMOS, who's going to give us their perspective on how they use best practices and how they endorse them. So this is part of the goal today, is to try to understand how different groups may go about endorsement process and popularizing different best practices. So Paul.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be here. Thanks, Johannes, for such a great introduction to OBPS. I'll just share my screen now. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right. Thanks for the introduction, Frank. As Frank mentioned, my name's Paul van Ruth. I'm the Principal Science Officer for Australia's Integrated Marine Observing System. And I want to talk to you today about how we use best practices in our program and why we feel it's so important to use them. So first, I'll give a bit of an introduction to our program. So we're recognised as one of the 13 Goose Regional Alliances, and within that, we're regarded as a leader in best practice marine science observations and data management. So this is across government and the private sector, and through industry, research, management, and operations. So we're a national collaborative research infrastructure. We're funded by the Australian government to provide sustained long-term observations of the marine environment. And we run with a co-investment model, and we get significant co-investment from our partner organisations, who you can see on the left of the slide here, which effectively doubles the total funds that we have to work with in the program. So we run around, at the moment we run more than 60 sub-facilities across the program. And you can see the different types we're running in the graphic here. These are collecting observations on more than 50 different climate and marine variables. These observations are integrated across scales, from the coastal ocean across the shelf to the open ocean, and across disciplines, so through physics, biogeochemistry, biology, and ecosystems. All observations that we collect, it's a condition of working with us that all of our observations and all of our data are made publicly available according to fair data principles through our Australian Ocean Data Network. So with all this information, we're making contributions to community, management, legal and policy needs in Australia. These observations and data are supporting operational services, the needs of research, management and industry, and they're creating societal benefit at regional, national and global scales. So on the right-hand side of the slide at the top, you can see the 5 key societal benefit areas that our observations are going into. And on the bottom, you can see the 3 main uses of data that we're involved in. So it's really important stuff that we're doing, helping keep people safe, helping manage marine resources. So we need to really make sure that we're thinking about how we can ensure we keep getting the funds to be able to keep doing this work. So it's about figuring out how we can build resilience in our program to make sure we can continue to provide these critical services. And that really comes down to the foundations that underpin our program, which I'm going to go into a little bit further now. So we have our sustained long-term observations. As I mentioned, that's what we're all about. And these are propped up, I guess, by 3 interconnected principles, which guide our strategies. And these are about maintaining relevance to maximise impact, building trust through high standards and transparency, and fostering the capacity in our program to grow and evolve. And these are all really about ensuring that we're working as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can to maximise the outcomes that we get from the investments that we make for our stakeholders and end users. So these principles are underpinned by our plans and processes and procedures which direct our day-to-day operations and really form the cornerstone of the foundations of our program, which you can see here. I'm not going to go into all of them. Today, I'm going to focus on our standardised best practice protocols, which is why we're all here, what we're all here to discuss. And I want to talk about why we think it's important to use these to help us to build trust in our program. So, whoops. So using best practice protocols to build trust. It's a condition of getting funding from IMOS that all procedures and protocols are to be standardised, endorsed by IMOS and registered with Ocean's best practice system. So this is part of the contract that's entered into with our operators to get funding from us. They need to provide this information. This is all of our procedures and protocols, from our calibrations, sampling and analysis protocols through data processing, data management and QA/QC procedures. And we ask for all of these documents to be registered with OBPS through IMOS. So this ensures that the DOIs, the digital object identifiers, are listed through our storage repositories which means when people search for them, they come to our storage repositories. And this helps us to maximise the impact that we get from IMOS funding. So it's another way that we can demonstrate to our funding masters that we're getting some benefit from the investments that we're making with those funds. And you can see down here the web address for our repository. You can go and have a look at what's going on there. So what are the IMOS endorsed best practices? How do we come up with those? They're collaboratively developed and refined by the IMOS community using relevant experts within our community. And there are a couple of different types that we have. We've got practices that are developed around established and recognised best practices. For example, our Southern Ocean Time Series mooring and our shelf mooring arrays have developed their practices around the IU's Quartod procedures. And our standardised data processing pipeline includes the IU's Net CDF checker to make sure that the information is adhering to climate and marine standards. Our second type is best practices developed through initiatives that are funded by IMOS that are now accepted as best practices or used as foundations by other organisations to develop their own best practices. So an example of this is our animal tagging protocols, which have now been taken up through ANABOS and endorsed by Goose through the ANABOS program. And our procedures through our IMOS Ships of Opportunity bioacoustics facility have been used as foundations to develop best practices through other organisations. And another example here is our BGC Argo facility, which uses the Goose endorsed practices used by the rest of the BGC Argo program. So through all of this, we've got 7 protocol videos and 38 community practices. So we're not all there yet. I mentioned that all of our protocols and procedures need to be listed in OBPS. It's a condition of the contracts. We're working through those as our new contracts come forward with our new funding cycle. And so we'll be following up with those, and there'll be a lot more practices going up onto OBPS in the near future for us. I think we're about 70%, I guess we could say, to where we want to be with that. Just some examples of the sort of things that we have through our protocol videos. You can see here different training videos that we have for our different types of sampling. And it's really important for us to have these sorts of things because it means that our sampling community across the country are working with the same information. They are trained in the same way to use the same protocols. And we can see that we're getting continuity in our sampling across our program. Here's a bit more information. If you go into a specific protocol, you can get information on who the publisher is, where it's come from. You can get a citation, which is where we can then track that and help us to get that impact that we're looking for. And a lot of other different information you can find there. So into our community practices and just some examples of the community practices that we've got. You can see 2 different types here. We've got a quality assessment and control report for our Southern Ocean Time Series for around 13 years of those temperature records. And we also have a best practice manual for our Ocean Gliders facility. Taking that further, we release different versions of these manuals. So the new version takes over from the previous version, which is superseded. As there are new developments in protocols and processes and new developments in what is best practice, we'll update these manuals and that'll go up into the Oceans Best Practices system. And another example of what we've got is information on quality control for different deployments. So you can see here, this is for our East Australian Current Deep Water Moorings Array. We've got a deployment from 2018 to 2019 and at the bottom deployment from 2016 to 2018. So if there's been any new developments in the way things have been processed or the procedures and protocols that go along with it, they'll be updated in the next version of the manual or for the next deployment. And I think I have a little bit of time here, so I will oops, go back. I'll just do a new share here and we can have a bit of a look. Let me find which one I'm after. This one. Can you all see that one now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Excellent, thank you. So this is the repository, the IMOS repository on Oceans Best Practices System, and you can just see the different recent submissions that we've had. Just more examples of the type of information that we have up here on our best practices. So for ship sea surface temperature for satellite, sea surface temperature validation, the bioacoustics procedures that I was speaking about, quality control procedures for real-time meteorological observations, a radiometry community of practice document, and many, many more that you can see. Net CDF conventions that we have up here. So yeah, a lot of information that can be found and used by the community. And I'll now go back to where I was. Okay, are we back again?
We see your slides, like not the normal slide view. Yes, now
okay.
it's good.
Excellent, slide view, great, thank you. All right, so what's the benefit of this? Why are we really doing it? Why do we want to see this? The benefits for us of building trust through best practices. The first thing for us is that it means that our operators unambiguously understand expectations. And these benefits that I'm going to talk about here really follow on from things that Johannes mentioned in the first talk as well. So this first point, our operators have IMOS endorsed standardized best practice protocols that are findable with regular updated training. So this means that they don't have to search around, they don't have to try and figure out what they need to do to go out and do the sampling that they're going to undertake for us with our funding. They don't have to spend their time doing that. They can focus on making sure that they're going out and getting the work done. So that saves time and money for everyone. It means that users of IMOS data can be confident that the information they're getting is of the highest possible quality. The data is readily accessible for them in standard formats. So if they want to take information that's been collected on the east coast of Australia and information from the west coast and information from the south coast, they don't have to spend a lot of time trying to get that into the same format before they can start to do their analysis. It's ready to go. So this means that they're more likely to come and take it and use it. It's easier to use. And also, really importantly, there's transparency in data quality information, from calibration to QA/QC and data management. So if a user wants to understand how the information's been collected, they can find exactly how it's been collected transparently from calibration right through to processing and data management, which is what really helps us to build that trust and make sure that people want to come and use our data. And building that trust also builds a reputation for good data and good procedures and protocols and good management of a program, which then means that funders can be confident, they can trust that their investments will generate impact that they're looking for, that we're going to be doing things that are going to provide benefits to society. And another added benefit through this is that having these standards helps to provide certainty to promote investment in sensor and hardware development, which is another really important thing that sort of those sort of industries are crying out for, these standard formats and these standards around protocols that will give them some certainty to help them with their investment. And it's really important for us to use these best practices to help us to build this trust and build our reputation. And if we have these things working in this way for us, it means that we can focus on continual improvement with our program, make sure that we keep on ensuring that we're using these best practices to underpin what we're doing. It allows us to be really proactive and really forward thinking in the way that we think about where we want to move to. And that's really important in helping us to make sure that we're providing for our stakeholders and end users. And with that, I'll leave it there and perhaps take some questions if there are any, if we have any time.
Yeah, we do have a couple minutes, Paul. I wonder if anybody has any questions for either Johannes or Paul?
There's a
There's
question in the chat
Okay.
from Robert. I'm interested in your strategy for socializing these protocols and updating them so they don't go unused or get out of date.
Excellent question. So that would come through our, each of our facilities will have steering committees. That'll be, consist of representatives from the community, the experts, who will be constantly revising these sorts of things as there are new developments in procedures and protocols, for example, or new developments in technology. We also have, as part of our program, a Science and Technology Advisory Committee who provide us with advice around these sorts of developments as well. And they will be, the protocols and procedures will be revised as new contracts come up. So as the funding rolls through, new contracts will need to be put into place, which will include the requirement for providing this documentation. So that'll be another opportunity to review it. So when that documentation comes in, as developed by the community with our assistance through the facility, we'll review that. We'll make sure that it is up to date and it is following best practices, and prior to endorsing that and submitting it to OBPS.
There's
I hope
another
that
question
answered the
by
question.
Crystal Wildman, maybe for both Johannes and Paul, whether as you consider these best practices, how do you consider ISO standards?
That would need to be a part of the consideration. So in developing the documentation that we need for a facility, as I mentioned, we want to know everything about what they're doing, from calibration right through to making the data publicly available and how the data is going to be managed. So within that, we'd need to consider these sorts of standards as well around the different types of data as they relate to the different types of data that we're collecting. And of course, the calibration is important because your data is only ever going to be as good as the calibration. And so we follow every step along the way and make sure that we're adhering to relevant standards and practices. We want to build that trust. We want to make sure that we're creating the standards, or we're following created standards, and we're adhering to best practices.
Thank you. There's a few other questions coming in. We're actually should be going into the next session, but just to bring it up, Hernan Garcia asks if there are best practices considered for fair and open data as we move forward, and Raisa Meyer is also asking how, or what do you think is the timeline for making these data and protocols to be made openly available?
Okay, so firstly, again, it's a condition of our funding, so that we're funded through the federal government through a program called the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. And it's a condition of that funding for us that any data collected by using that funding needs to be made publicly available. So, and all data that we work with through the Australian Ocean Data Network, that's how it's made publicly available, is handled using fair data principles. We also work closely with the Australian Research Data Commons who are also funded through the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy to make sure that we're upholding those principles. So that's I think that's answered that question. So Rosa, as far as the timelines go, again, this is a condition of the contract. This comes into the contract that operators sign with us. There's a certain time frame within which the data needs to be processed and uploaded into our Australian Ocean Data Network. It varies at times between different facilities, but it's certainly for all facilities, it's within 6 months.
Yeah, I think that she also wondered how quickly do you move a best practice document through the system to have it deposited?
We sometimes need to chase those a bit longer, but generally, we put it in it's put in as a milestone, as a requirement within this contract. It's not put in as a funding milestone, but it's put in as a milestone. So again, it'd be along a similar timeline. We'd probably be looking to get these out and up within 6 months. And as it's in there as a milestone, when they get close, we start chasing them down. And we have a good relationship with all of our community, so we don't really need to chase too hard.
Yeah, Ben, I'm going to eat into one more minute of your time. There's an important question here by Rohan Allen on whether you see the best practices that are endorsed by IMOS considered to be a requirement only internally in Australia, or how do you walk those out internationally? And I think that this is a question that everybody should have clear.
Okay, so for us, we're working to make sure that they're suitable for what we need to do within our program, and they're readily available and searchable. So within the OCEAN's best practices system. So if there's a practice there that people think they can adopt elsewhere internationally, then we'd be happy to see that. And as I mentioned in the talk, there's a few that have already gone that way, that have been developed through as part of our funding, that have now been adopted internationally in different ways. Excuse me. So I mentioned our animal tagging work, which is now adopted as best practice through ANABOS, which is part of Goose. The bioacoustics has been, which is worked up through our program, has been used as a foundation for development of best practices through other organisations internationally. And I mentioned BGC Argo, but I think that's just a larger program into which we've tapped. So our BGC Argo protocols are the Goose BGC Argo protocols.
Okay.
So certainly,
I think that clarified quite a bit, Paul. We need to move now to have a session in which we all get to know each other a little bit through what we call a dialogue of ocean community priorities. And that's going to be led by Ben Roberts.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, so we're going to ask you all to talk to each other. You know from the first plenary that English is certainly not the first language for everyone here, or necessarily a language you find easy to converse in. But we encourage you to give it a go. This workshop is conducted in English throughout for the most part, and we really want you to get to know each other a little bit and help to surface some of the challenges and the priorities that you're bringing to the workshop. So we're going to be in a series of 3 short breakouts, and we'll shuffle the groups each time. You should be with 3, maybe 4, maybe 1 other person. And we strongly encourage you to participate in the conversations. I've just put into the chat, if we can pause the chat comments for a moment, please, so that people can see the questions that I'm putting into the chat. These are what you'll be considering in your breakouts. So the first is, what big challenge do you bring to this gathering? And the second is, what do you hope to get from and give to this workshop? And so you can take a turn answering both those questions, each person in your group, and maybe you'll have a little bit of time after that for some discussion. And of course, offer just some very brief introduction of yourself if you don't know one another, where you're calling from, and just your where you work and your title perhaps. But the breakouts are short. They'll be well, they were planned to be 9 minutes. We'll see how we go because we're running a little bit behind schedule. And we do want to leave you with 10 minutes for a break after this portion, and then we'll resume for the second half of the plenary after this. So I've got the breakouts more or less set up, but it's possible that some people have dropped off. And so give me a moment to just reset the breakout groups, and then I will move you into the first of the 3 breakouts. Then we'll come back together and share a little bit in chat about what's emerged from this. And we'll use that in some of the cafe conversations that come up later, some of the output from these conversations. So again, the questions are in the chat. You can take a moment while I set the breakout groups up again to contemplate these. What big challenge do you bring to this gathering, and what do you hope to get from and give to this workshop? So just hang on 1 second and I'll move you into the breakouts again. Okay. Looks like we are good to go here. So you'll have an 8-minute timer in the top of your Zoom window. And then when that finishes, you'll have 1 more minute to stay with your group. So don't click the button to return to the main room. Use that minute and you'll be returned automatically. We'll see you back here in 9 minutes and we'll do it again.
The next set of keynote speakers, I think we have an honor to have here Sara Venturini from the Group on Earth Observations, which is GEO. She's the climate coordinator and now also the ocean and water coordinator at GEO. And she will be followed by Ellen Johannesson of the ICES. And she's also an early career ocean practitioner or professional. And I believe she's connected to the Ocean Best Practices System as an ambassador as well. After that, we'll go into a panel that is going to talk about the capacity development. So Sarah, are you available to come online?
Hi, hello everyone. Hello, Frank. Good to see you. And thanks for inviting me today to open this segment of the workshop. As you rightly said, I'm speaking on behalf of the GEO community. And I would like to reiterate the importance of recalling the fact that the UN Decade of Ocean Science will focus on global action using the best available ocean science to sustainably manage the oceans, to provide common frameworks, and to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is clear, everybody knows, everybody agrees that our oceans are imperial. Many scientific reports, the World Ocean Assessment has documented a cycle of decline in ocean health, and over the coming decades, changing climate, growing global population, and multiple environmental stressors will have very significant impacts on our oceans. So here at the Group on Earth Observations, GEO, through the work of the GEO Blue Planet Initiative, we are working to monitor the world oceans using openly available and shared Earth observation data. And this is done in partnership with a number of organizations and initiatives, including the Global Ocean Observing System, GOOS, which is a sustained collaborative system of ocean observations that encompasses in situ and satellite systems. And GEO is supporting governments, UN agencies, and individual scientists with Earth observation data on oceans, and is committed to supporting this decade of action. So I want to tell you more a bit about the GeoBlue Planet initiative, which is the ocean arm of GEO. GeoBlue Planet has delivered GEO's proposed contribution to the decade of ocean science to the UNESCO IOC, and focusing on the knowledge gaps, the scientific questions and priority areas that should be addressed. The GeoBlue Planet initiative really has produced a comprehensive set of inputs around the need for, first of all, a clean ocean, secondly, a predicted ocean, if I can say this, where the society has the capacity to understand the current and future ocean conditions, forecast their changes and the impacts on human well-being and livelihoods. Thirdly, the need for a safe ocean where human communities are protected from ocean hazards and where safety and operation at sea and of the coast are ensured. And finally, a sustainably harvested and productive ocean. In this sense, the GeoBlue Planet initiative is proposing to leverage GEO's convening power across a variety of stakeholders and our interdisciplinary work program to use and apply Earth observation in support of the ocean decade. And these ideas were really developed about 3 years ago during our annual event, the Geo Week in 2029 in Canberra, Australia, at a dedicated side event where panelists presented and discussed how GEO can most effectively contribute to the UN Ocean Decade. And following that initial discussion, many other follow-up ideas and concrete initiatives emerged. Most recently, during the GEO Virtual Symposium in June 2022, we had a dedicated session that explored how Earth observation can enable integrated coastal zone management and marine spatial planning through reviewing the concepts, the policy drivers, by surveying the available tools within the Earth observation community and understanding the user requirement inputs. And at the same time, we considered best practices, use cases in especially developing countries that are the most vulnerable to this type of situations. Also, in June this year, at the UN Climate Conference in Bonn, in Germany, there was a first mandated ocean and climate change dialogue, which was held in response to a mandate from the climate COP 26 to anchor ocean action under the UNFCCC. And this dialogue really addressed the issue of strengthening and integrating national ocean climate action under the Paris Agreement and to enable ocean climate solutions and optimize institutional connections. And later, still this year in July, there was the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, where the importance of ocean observations in tackling existing and emerging environmental challenges was also emphasized. And there are a number of innovative solutions that have been discussed to tackle these challenges involving the deployment of new technology and the use of Earth observation data and information to address all the emerging threats to health, ecology, economy, and so on. And we think that, we perceive that based on the outcomes of this wide range of scientific and policy events in recent years, there is a push to frame the discussion through the lens of an ocean climate biodiversity nexus, and at the same time, the need for technical solutions that would integrate big Earth data for coastal zone management, to support adaptation plans and ocean action in general, so that we can improve the effectiveness of all measures to build resilience. So our community that is really made of member countries, partner organizations, space agencies, and NGO initiatives such as Blue Planet and the Marine Biodiversity Observing Network and BON, we're really aiming to take on this implementing role in the UN Ocean Decade to fill the data gaps at this time when there is increasing awareness and commitment to recognize the relevance of data and science to support the global ocean agenda. So in this light, I'm really here to welcome the discussions on best practices as a way to share knowledge and support capacity development, and most importantly, to provide examples on what is possible with Earth observations for decision makers to continue endorsing our work in all these policy fora and at the national level. So thank you again for inviting me here. I hope I provided some insight on our work, and I will be happy to continue following the discussions.
Thank you, Sarah, and I appreciate the pointing to Blue Planet and the contact that you have. So it's an important connection that people may have with you as we think about how we can encourage countries, and GEO is made of all the countries the same way as the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. And if participants here can push their own representatives to these organizations to do the right thing, the way that we're talking about here, we all benefit. So thank you very much. And I wonder if Ellen Johannesson is here. Hi, Ellen.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share a couple of slides. So let me just share my screen. This one. Okay. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks very much for inviting me. As you heard, my name is Ellen Johannesson. I'm the coordinating officer at the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, but I'm actually not linked to ocean best practices, but I am a PhD candidate as well at the at the World Maritime University, where I'm working on a project called Empowering Women for the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and I'm the ECOP focal point there. And I'm also a member of the DEI task team for the early career ocean professionals, where I've had the opportunity to work with some of the DEI OBPS, this is a lot of acronyms, team members there. And then I'm also the DEI task team lead for the internal IC's Early Career Scientist initiative. So I thought I would just give you a little bit of, in the next few minutes, some reflections on why diversity and inclusion is so important in the Ocean Decade, and some of the work that I'm doing, some insight into the Empowering Women program, and then a little bit through the ICES journey from an institutional perspective on how we've been tackling some of these issues. So this slide is a picture of, it's a graphical summary from the North Atlantic UN Decade, Ocean Decade Planning Workshop, which just seems like a lifetime ago. It was in Halifax in January 2020. And what I think that is so nice about this picture is that even in those early discussions, what really came through was the importance of inclusion and really critically reflecting on our science system if we're going to be able to realize the transformational change that the Ocean Decade aims at. And I guess I also wanted to start a little bit by talking about dimensions of diversity and inclusion. My talk will talk a lot about gender, which is where my research is focused, but diversity is a lot more than gender. And I like this very simple definition that diversity includes the visible and invisible differences that exist between people. So it's all kinds of things. And it's a fact, we're all different. And I think what's really important is to think about inclusion as an action, something that we can do institutionally, but also at an individual level to think about how we can create more equality in access to opportunities and creating collaborative and supportive working environments, especially in the ocean and marine science space. And then I have used this underrepresentation, which I think is a really important concept. And I always use this definition that was used by, or that was created by the OBPS DEI task team, because I think it really helps us to think about what is underrepresentation. Well, it happens when the membership of an organization doesn't have the kind of diversity it needs to represent the views and needs of the populations and communities affected by the actions in its mandate. And of course, this is very true of gender. And when we think about marine science, women are very much underrepresented, especially in the North Atlantic, where ICES works, at least in leadership roles, but also globally, I think, as well. So the Empowering Women Project is tackling this issue. We're a project sponsored by the Department of Fisheries, Oceans and Canada, and we're 2 PhDs and a postdoc. There's my own research, which is about gender equality in international marine science. My PhD colleague, Renes Oma-Adjwala, she's working on gender equality in Kenya in academic ocean institutes. And then the postdoc, Maria Amalia Rodriguez, she's doing a comparative analysis between different IGOs and NGOs. And in this last year of the project, what we're working on now, building on all the research that we've done, is to create an action plan for the ocean decade. And in that connection, we have just launched a stakeholder consultative forum, and I would really like to invite all of the ocean best practice community and everyone here, if you're interested, to think about registering to be part of the consultative forum to give input on the action plan as we move forward. So please scan the QR code or definitely reach out to me. I'd be happy to provide you with a link. Okay, so to focus a little bit on what we're doing at ICES, I'll just give you a little bit of context for those of you who aren't familiar with the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea. We're an intergovernmental organization that coordinates marine science in the North Atlantic. 20 member countries, more than 5,000 experts, 150 expert groups, and we're currently gender blind. So we don't have an overview of how many men and women are contributing to our work. We're currently working on putting the infrastructure in place that we will need to collect gender disaggregated data in a best practice kind of way. And I often start with this slide because what I think it shows is it shows the pictures of our council meeting starting from 1904, 1948, 1988, and 2018. And I think it shows how little we've changed in over 100 years in terms of gender representation and other kinds of visible types of diversity overall. So recognizing the need for change in 2019, we set a high-level commitment to create a more diverse, inclusive, and gender-balanced organization. And these words were really championed by our first female General Secretary, Dr. Anne-Christine Brusendorf, who she completed her term last year. So it was really this high-level commitment that's given us the opportunity to work more on these issues. So it's really important to collect gender disaggregated data for monitoring. I think, yeah, all kinds of scientists understand the importance of counting things, but it's not just about who's there. It also has to be about qualitative data. So it's important to have both of those things. So here on the screen, my pyramid there shows using our conference participation, where we do collect gender disaggregated data as a proxy for our community overall. There we have pretty good gender balance in our community. But the further up the organization you go, the fewer women you have. So with women representing around 20% of the decision-making parts of the organization. And then, so in And then there's some on the bottom, there are some pie charts there showing different parts of other counting I've done, which shows the women underrepresented in keynote presentations, though when they're judged on specific scientific contributions, they are winning 2/3 of the awards at our science conference. And then the third pie chart there shows that women are underrepresented in career level awards that we call the Outstanding Achievement Award and Prix d'Excellence. And I think a really important factor in our journey here is also to collect this qualitative data and find that we found that 1/3 of respondents had witnessed or experienced gender-based harassment in participating in ICES work, things like subtle exclusions, not being heard, being left off of emails, even if you're the clear expert, unconscious bias and everyday sexism, progression hindered due to having children, comments about your bodies, or persistent unwanted sexual advances. So these are things we really needed to tackle in a really structured way. So this year we have been working on a gender equality plan. And although it's focused on gender, its approach is intersectional, recognizing that and just trying to create a more inclusive working culture overall. We've created some qualitative targets around creating a gender fair organization, an inclusive working culture, a family-friendly working environment, protection from harassment, professionalized gender equality work, and awareness of sex and gender in research. And then some quantitative indicators to kind of measure our progress along the way. So yes, I guess what has really been important for the ICES journey has been, I think these are things that are really important in realizing a gender equality plan, is to commit resources. Diversity, equity, inclusion, or gender equality, these aren't things that can be done in the margins of people's work. There needs to be dedicated time for these issues. You need executive level commitment, but also community level engagement. And that's what we've been doing in the ICES community, is working, going out and talking with different parts of our community and getting feedback and getting them to say what they could contribute and how they could themselves try and work in a more inclusive way. So working with the chairs of our expert groups, or working great ideas also coming from our early career scientists that we've been able to feed into our plan. And the aim is really not for tokenistic representation in our organization, but to create and foster an inclusive working culture. And that's not just for social justice, which is also important, but also for even better science, because I think that's what's really important, is to have this diversity of perspectives included if we're going to, achieve the objectives of the Ocean Decade. And I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. This is such an important message, and I think we all have to contribute and make our part to see a change in our community. This is just unacceptable that this continues in this day and age, in what we're planning for the future also. So thank you very much, and we need to keep this always on our front burner. I have to leave, but I'm going to leave you here with moderation by Jay Perman. And thank you very much for participating. Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for your moderation and your inspirational notes. And thank you, Ellen, for your presentation. We appreciate the recognition of the work that the task team on equality and diversity of the OBPS has done under two very capable early career professionals, Cora Horstman and Jordan Van Stavel. And so I'd like to suggest that as we look at inclusion and diversity, part of that involves capacity sharing. And I use the word sharing, but I also would add capacity development. And I'd like now to turn to a capacity development panel, which will be led by Steve Diggs, and he will introduce his panelists as we move forward. Steve, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Jay, and thanks for the invitation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I'm hoping that everybody can see the slides. Thumbs up if you can both see the slides in here?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Great. So we want to talk in this panel about capacity development. And I think that many times people head swims when they start talking, mention capacity development. What is that exactly? I'm going to go through a few slides and then we'll bring in our my fellow panelists, and we will start to take some questions and have some lively discussions. And if I could advance my slides, it would even be better. All right, so when we talk about capacity development, there's a couple of different ways to look at it. There is a more formal definition by the UN Development Panel that talks about transformations that empower leaders and individuals and organizations and societies. If somebody does not lead the changes generated and guided to those is meant to benefit, then it cannot be said to have enhanced capacity, even if it served a valid development purpose. Now, that's a lot to take in. I actually prefer the Wikipedia definition, which is capacity building or development is the improvement in an individual's or organization's facility to produce, perform, or deploy. And I think it gets more at the heart of the matter, which is this is what we're trying to do in oceanography in a general sense, but more with the best practices. Best practices sort of sit on top of oceanography as a way to optimize it. And as National Science Foundation says, is to reduce the time to science. So we want to increase our capacity to deliver what we need to deliver. And it's a little bit different than it was when I got in the field of oceanography. I'm an engineer, not a professor or academic. So I have a little bit different view on things. When we talk about capacity development, as we can see on the left, there is a picture from the 1960s at a conference room that I can actually look out of my window and see. That is how science was done. And if you look to the picture on the right with Ocean Teacher, one of the IOC initiatives that you see, it looks quite different. And the question is, we kind of know, and this refers to the last talk on equity, diversity, and inclusion, that the table on the left still seems to be the seat of power, which tends to serve its own needs. So how do we get the people in Ocean Teacher to sit at the table where the decisions are being made and where the resources are being allocated? So the picture at the bottom, you see Professor Brian Arvik. He's in Ghana, and he has an ocean school in Ghana that's, you know, one of the best practices, which is to take these things directly to many underserved or economically disadvantaged communities that have a lot of bright young minds who will bring new and creative perspectives. And one of the reasons I'm bringing that up here is this comes directly out of the IPCC 6th assessment that says involving traditionally marginalized groups, including women, young people, indigenous people, local communities, and ethnic minorities. And I will add, in addition, the axes of diversity that you can't see, which may be your culture, your religion, your sexual orientation. All of these things will improve the prospects for effective action, because if we stick with the people that we've had all along, and this is in addition to and not replacing, then we will expand the amount of scientific brain power that we have and action that will lead to optimal outcomes. Just as a reference to the last talk, just so that to connect the dots in a, if I have this pulpit for a second, is we had in the UN Ocean Decade workshop, more seats at the table. You can see the panel we have from 4 people born on 4 continents. That was last September. And so I would love to connect with the last speaker on the EDI workshops that go into the UN Ocean Decade. When we talk about capacity development, we have different tools and approaches, as you can see in the diagram on the right, sort of an iterative steps that we go through that go from monitoring and assessing to defining and then implementing. You can do that at the individual, the organizational, at the system level, and you can do it organizational, national, and regional. each one of these is going to require that the best practices get configured in a specific way for maximum effectiveness. So the statement in the middle really hits home for the things that I've been involved in, which is the paradigm of building capacity in Africa switches to the building on African capacity. A subtle but important difference. One is you're grafting the culture and the methods onto a community. And then the second, you're assessing in the community where these things can go and where their strengths are and adding your strength to theirs. Very different way of looking at capacity development. So today we are talking about two types of capacity that we want to focus on. One is the best practices for capacity development. You could think of that as in training early career people into oceanography and making sure that you both support them and make sure that they have the adequate resources so they can bring their best self to these problems. But there's also capacity development for the best practices themselves. And so we would like to be able to build up and sustain the best practices so that they can have maximum adoption, and we can go through the iterative cycle of improving those best practices. So different types of capacity building. One is for the best practices to get out and to be adopted and used, and the other is a receptive audience that can use these best practices. So there's always this balance between the needs, the capacity themselves. We don't want to reinvent the wheel unless we really intend to, that we've tried the wheel and that it needs improvement. This was brought up in the last panel. So this is sort of a mirror image of a past panel that went on a few hours ago, one for each side of the world. Co-design. Co-design is very important. There's a statement that we use here in the United States, especially for underserved communities: nothing about us without us. So co-design is essential in capacity development to make sure that there's true involvement and maximum efficacy. All right, so now the capacity development for the best practices themselves. One of the things that Frank and I have been discussing is best practices for the for process content in formal undergraduate and graduate coursework. That's something I'm personally working on here at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, is to bring this, in particular, research data management as a best practice that's taught. It's something that Frank didn't get in his graduate training. And we even talked to a few early career researchers who haven't seen that type of training in their coursework either. So getting this, these best practices advertised, known, bringing up the awareness as early as possible in oceanographers' careers will lead to optimum outcomes. What formal coursework are available? We don't really know. We don't have a really good assessment. And are the best practices already taught? That's something that we'll have to dig down into the institutions of higher learning to find out if any of their instructors have the awareness of best practices, and then are they incorporating those into the curriculum? Finally here, I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of set the stage. So I was recently involved in a thing called Ocean Best Practices, as was brought up in the previous session for capacity development, is the game is changing. One of the biggest changes, of course, is COVID. COVID really depressed the number of oceanographic observations that are taken every year. And other than for autonomous vehicles, we see an overall depression. We're measuring the ocean less. We are interacting less than we used to. And so there was, has been the 5th year of Ocean Hack Week has brought together developers and engineers and oceanographers to bring about this body of work that is code, notebooks, and methods of using data that all oceanographers around the world can use. We consider it to be a best practice, both convening this Ocean Hack Week, but also the outputs. So this is a, sort of a microcosm of capacity development. We are 6 countries, 9 time zones, and for the first time ever, in 3 different native languages, meaning the Portuguese section was completely in Portuguese, written and spoken, as was the Spanish section out of Lima, Peru. So, 3 languages, 9 time zones, 6 countries. This is what capacity development actually looks like. All right, so we're going to get into the discussion points for the panel itself. I believe that my fellow panelists have been spotlight. Is that true, Jay?
Not yet, but as soon as they start speaking, I will do that.
Okay. All right, so should have our panelists turn on their cameras. And I don't know,
Josephine
Jay,
and Nilu, is that right?
that is correct. Josephine and Nilu.
All right, I will find them and I'll put their bios in the chat too.
Thank you very much. And we have some seed questions. Hi, Josephine.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Well, it's morning over here, but I'm sure we can come together over something like coffee. And then Nilu should be coming on.
I'm not seeing Nilu.
Okay.
Possible that she is dropped off.
She was here earlier.
Yep. Well, we're all good. I mean, I think that we have a broad panel here. We do have some time. And let's see. I was just speaking with, not Michael. I'm sorry. Jay, who was setting up the breakouts in the last session?
Ben.
Ben, thank you, Ben. Ben, since we, sorry, I saw Michael and it replaced your name in my mind. Would it be constructive at this point to kind of pivot and do what we did in the earlier session, since we seem to be down 1 panelist, and maybe construct 7 breakouts if we could, and then give people about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to discuss one of the discussion points here. And what I can do is once they're in breakouts, I can drop in on their breakout if we have 7 of them. So they'll be a little large, but that's fine. I think we have overall how many participants? 64. So 10 people per.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody take 1 question. So the we can do 1 through 6 or 7. And then each breakout by number can take that number question to discuss.
Now that's can we get the text of those 7 into the chat?
You bet.
Because they're going to lose the screen share.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'll make sure that I get these discussion questions. I'll drop them in this chat right now, so that they will have them as they go into their breakout. So Ben is going to drop you in randomly into a breakout room for you to discuss things. If you don't feel comfortable discussing them in English, please make sure you use the chat facility to do so. I will go ahead and drop the questions into the larger group chat now. Well, hopefully if I can cut and paste. Hang on.
Steve, do you want to ask somebody to be a scribe or a
Well, I mean, I think so. I think yes, I think that's the that would be key, right, Jay, to make sure that you have somebody, 2 people that you volunteer, 1 to be the scribe to record, and then separately, perhaps a person to report out very briefly at the end.
So just to note, if you put things in the chat when you're in a breakout, the rest of the group won't be able to see that when you come back.
That's true. I'm going to have to drop the question into each chat because for some reason I'm unable to paste into the.
Do you want to send me your slide deck? I could put it in. If we put it in the chat before we go into the breakouts, then everyone will have it. I'm just saying if you take notes in the chat, those won't come.
Yeah, you're sure. So I'll go ahead and send that to you, Ben. And here is the slide deck. If there's permission problems, please let me know. I don't think there should be. Yes, you should be able to view.
Yep, I think I've got them. Let's see here. I'm not sure if the numbers are going to come through. Let's share that to everybody. I love this. We call this guerrilla facilitation.
That's right. It was necessary. This is what capacity development looks like in the real world anyway. You have to think on your feet and go pretty quickly.
Isn't that strange? I'm having the same issue as you, or somehow.
Yeah. I think what we can do is, since I can take the same link, I'm going to go ahead and post that link into chat. Right. And for each breakout, for your scribe can bring up and read the final slide in that presentation.
Right. That's slide 11. And
yep.
Now just quickly create a Google Notes doc maybe, and so people can take some notes in that.
Here we go. Wow. You're really good at this.
So that's in there now, and I'll just add some rooms in there once you get going. So we're set for 15 minutes with 7 breakouts.
Sounds good to me.
And you'll be able to move yourself around, Steve.
Okay.
And here we go. See you back here in 15.
Perfect.
This meeting is being recorded.
Wow, I got 2 notices for the price of 1. All right. So we had, Ben, how many rooms?
7, 1 for each question.
1 for each question. Okay. Here are your ground rule. Just 1. Just need 2 essential sentences. The first one is the question that you were discussing. And the second 1 or 2 sentences is the major conclusion that you came to in your brief discussion. And we'll start with room 1. Ready? And who's reporting for room 1?
Was it Joanna or Christian?
It wasn't me, but I couldn't pass the notes. So I have the notes for sure. So
okay, Christian, you're going to start us off. Ready, set, and go.
Okay. Sorry, Steve. Can you repeat again the process?
Yes,
how you want it?
So, as a matter of fact, I'm going to throw you lob you a softball. So, your question was, what are the key factors to consider? Human interaction, education, resources, economy, and language when you talk about best practices, capacity building.
Well, we've been certainly discussing around. We've been first of all debating a bit on the overarching concepts, but definitely we identified education as the most important or most crucial factor for this to succeed. Of course, the rest of the factors are very important. Resources and economy are crucial. A very good sentence that was said is that a few million cannot fix the problem that 8 billion people have created. So we really need to allow resources and funding to come into the game, because it's something that cannot be definitely done voluntarily forever, even though it can start as a bottom-up approach. So of course we need, although people capable, infrastructure, funding, etc. Human interaction as a third factor seems to me a very important as well to us, because it's about building relationships, about listening and ensuring that the messages are really heard. And of course, even though having the resources and this education, this human interaction is again crucial to really put the kind of the juice or the soul in this process. Language, of course, was identified as a very catalyzer, let's say, for engaging communities and for creating this engagement, because, of course, language might break a lot of barriers, and that's something that OBPS has already implemented during the last years. And another factor, last but not least, let's say, coordination and guidance was like a fifth factor that has been stated or suggested to really take into consideration, because once you have the community integrated and this bottom-up process built, there's a need for a head or a guidance mechanism for keep running the show, let's say. And I will probably stop here to not monopolize the conversation, and so this is kind of in a nutshell what I could retain.
You're setting an
our
excellent
awesome
example. Thank you.
Thank you.
So room 2, report out. Room 3, get ready. Room 2, so the co-design question for sustainability. How do we sustain the institutional capacity as people in the institution change? So we're talking about changing institutions. How do we sustain that capacity? Room 2 report out person is... We can go to room 3 if we need to. Anybody from room 2? Yes, thank you, Jay. All right, room 3, you ready?
Yes.
All right, so your question was, to what end do we need to develop this capacity, best practices, and what will be the purpose of this capacity building mechanism?
So if I'm gonna summarize briefly the conversation. So one of the first point that was brought up was the idea of maintaining the capabilities that have been developed locally and trying to expand them little by little. So that would be the purpose, the end to doing this. And another point is, of course, to develop equal knowledge about the oceans and learn from experienced scientists to share the knowledge and train new generations. But one aspect that we found important was to adapt the projects to the local conditions. And for example, we had an example of somebody saying that this should be inclusive of all the staff that is involved locally, including people that might not have the certification that is required in other parts of the world to do this or that. So taking that into account, the training of people locally, and be mindful that different regions don't have the same capacities to follow some of the standards. For example, developing countries will not necessarily be able to apply the same level of standards compared to more developed countries, but that still doesn't mean that there isn't good science that can be done, and that should not prevent the collection of the essential variables that we are all aiming at collecting. So that's in a nutshell what our conversations were about.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matthew. All right, so we have time only for one more report out. And since Mary Neely has volunteered, we're going to take that as our last report out. And I will ask you here to, if you're the person who's summarizing your discussion, is to continue to take the notes and put them in the group document so that we have them, so that the conveners of this meeting also have them as a resource. So go ahead, Mary.
Great, thank you. I'm going to leave my camera off for bandwidth. I was in group 6. The other participants were Rohan Allen, Hernan Garcia, Jim Edson, and Humran Tuoa. And our question was, once we have built, can we assess capacity development? And if we can, how do we measure change with that? Do we have any metrics? We felt that yes, we could assess that. The place to start is with a baseline. People are not too thrilled to take surveys, so maybe the surveys could be incentivized, that they could be institutional level, that the results could be in some sort of skills audit, maybe an assessment of meets needs, is better at meeting needs or excels at meeting needs, not looking at pejorative, that of course it would be voluntary. The suggestion was made that the UN Decade Data Coordination Group would be a great group to do that. And Humran made a very important comment very late in the conversation that more communication is essential to capacity development. So that's where we'll end. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a good place to end. Again, I know that Jay and others, Frank, Ben will be using the notes and will refer to your notes. So make sure that they're clear. My name is Steve Diggs, and I thank you for the invitation. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jay.
Well, thank you, Steve. And that was a very interesting session, which probably could have used the whole of the 3 hours to discuss, and I would have enjoyed that. I also find that in listening to the report outs and recognizing the questions, the human, cultural, and social interactions of capacity development are as important as the technical. And I think as we move through the week and we come to the final plenary, let's keep that in mind. And with thinking about moving forward on the week, let me talk to you briefly about how this workshop's going to work and how you can make the most of it and contribute the most to the activities. The goal of the workshop is to encourage the development of best practices, to promote their documentation, and to share them widely using the Ocean Best Practice System. So this would include developing a framework or a method for establishing best practices in ocean observing, for gaining endorsement, as we heard earlier, for these practices from the community, and then adopting them. Each of the sessions, and there's a wide variety of topics from eDNA to standards to the air-sea interface to Arctic practices and many more. You can look at those. Ben will show you the list later. But each of the sessions needs to think about certain things in terms of recommendations. These include recommendations for the community, for us, for all of us, recommendations for the Ocean Best Practice System, and then potential cross-cultural collaborations across the themes. Now, I make the comment about recommendations to the Ocean Best Practice System because the steering group there takes these very seriously. This is the 6th workshop, and I can tell you factually that in the past 5, when the recommendations were brought forth, they were both considered, but also many of them were adopted. And we're seeing the results of that through greater use of the Ocean Best Practice System repository. The summary of the sessions, the recommendations, are to be part of an output report, which will form then the basis for the workshop proceedings. And I was asked yesterday, when will they be available? And sometime early next year is our objective, but there's a lot of work to integrate them. And therefore, the integration, the first step of that is to bring together the information, we hope by October 17th, of the various sessions here, so that we can integrate them for the plenary on October 19th. And I would encourage you not to miss the October 19th plenary, which is an hour and a half, and we'll really review the core of the workshop discussions. For the themes and the sessions, individually, the chairs have made arrangements. They've designed the sessions. And so what you'll see is quite a bit of variation, but mainly the common theme is dialogue. The purpose is for you to engage and to be able to talk to your colleagues and get new ideas and contribute things. In addition to the theme discussions, we're offering cafe sessions where you can have cross-pollination between themes, talk about best practices and what are your needs, and get advice from your colleagues. And they really are both social and work sessions. The mechanics of how to do this, I want to turn to Ben now, who's a master of this, and let him walk you through some of the key things. So when you go through the sessions, when you go through the various panels, you can feel comfortable in making your contributions and learning things. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jay. This is going to be a little bit of a fire hose of information. It is recorded, so you can come back and watch this, and I'll show you how to access recordings. And I've also just dropped into the chat our main tech support document, which gives you contact information so that you can reach out to me anytime, and we can follow up on things. I'll also be hanging out on this Zoom line in the main room, the plenary room, from time to time over the next couple of weeks. And so if you see me here, please do drop in and ask me questions as well. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you Kiko Chat, QIQO chat, and that's quality in, quality out, a play on GIGO, the famous acronym for garbage in, garbage out. So we're looking here at the main room inside of Kiko Chat, which is where you land once you come in and click participate. And hopefully all of you got here through this rather than a direct Zoom link. And it's important for two reasons. First of all, it's the way you're going to access the Zoom lines for all of the other sessions. The theme related sessions are not happening in this room. On the left-hand side here, you can see all the themes are listed. And if you just see this without a video icon, see the video there, that shows somebody is actually on video, the Zoom line for that room, which you access with the red button here. But down here are some folks that are just looking at this workspace for best practices in the ocean decade, right? And you click there, and now there's a different red button to access the Zoom line that's open 24/7 during the workshop for conversations on best practices in the ocean decade. And you'll see you have a different welcome document that's here. And at the top of the screen, you'll find a variety of different buttons that you can use to access various features that we've integrated. So some of these are Google Docs and other things, and I'll go through those in a minute. But the main thing is you need to understand that to access the different theme sessions, you have to get into Kiko Chat. That tech support document I shared has information about that, and you've received emails about that. And then you find your theme, and then you click join video for that theme. So other things that are available within each of the theme workspaces, there is a theme synopsis document for each of them that has information about that theme. And in many cases, it has some information about when the sessions are. But we also have the calendar embedded, and I'll talk about the calendar in a minute. There is also a notes document, and this one is editable. So here you can take notes, and you also want to track who's participating in each of the sessions. So when you join a session, please do complete this. The email is optional, but at least show us who was here. And this is a template. So for session leads, you want to identify at least one person to take notes during your sessions. You copy this template, paste it down below here so that you can reuse the template if you're having multiple sessions for your theme. We have the calendar, which I'll look at in a minute, the overall workshop agenda. There's a directory of participants. So let's take a look at this briefly. This is how you can reach out to people without having to share emails. You can see who's online, but there's also a search and a map. So I can put in anybody's name, hit search, and then it will bring them up. And there's an option there then to you select that person and you can email them. Actually, well, this is me, so I can't, but you'll see if you select someone else. Here, we'll do one of my doppelgangers. So you can send a direct message, but I encourage doing an email, and then they will have your email and they can reply back to you. We have a discussion board. So it may be that in the live sessions, there isn't enough time to finish the conversations that you want to have, or perhaps you can't participate in one of the live sessions because of the time that it's being held. But another way to continue these conversations is over here on the discussion forum. So you can click here and add a new conversation. And right now we just have one category, but when you do this, you can actually add new categories as well with the little plus sign down here. And what I do want to show you is that there is one conversation, thanks to Mariam from before, on sharing your LinkedIn URLs. So you can come into this one and just put in a comment here and put in your LinkedIn and maybe a little bit about the sort of person you want to connect with if you like. And that's a way to share that information. And let's see. One other thing to note here, and this is particularly useful, for example, with something like the theme notes, all of these different embedded documents or other pieces of information can be opened in a separate window. If you scroll down to the bottom of them and you click here, now that notes doc is just popped out over here and it's a little bit easier to work with. You see it's just in a separate tab in my browser. So now I'm going back to the KikoChat interface. And I think that's enough. I'll show you just one more thing on the welcome document for each of the themes. There's a link to the Google Drive that has the folders for all of the themes. And inside of these folders, you'll find your final report template, as well as links to the same note documents and the synopsis. They're all living in those subfolders, and you all have access to them through that on the welcome tab. So I want to talk now about the Team Up calendar. So that can be viewed here. And it has a number of different view modes. We're looking right now at the agenda view, which is the most compact one. It defaults to your time zone, which is right now, there we have to scroll down. You can see I'm in Eastern time. If that's not correct, you can click there and click show all time zones and find yours and change that, but it should pick the thing up correctly. So the times you see in this calendar should be the actual times. And in each of these, you can open that item up. There's a blue sign up button, which is a courtesy to the leads for that, to let them know that you're coming, and they can actually see that list of people and capture your emails and send you out a special notice as well, and then stay in touch that way. So I encourage you to sign up for the sessions you want. But again, you access them over here by finding that theme workspace and clicking join video. So the links to join Zoom are not inside of the calendar, because this calendar is actually publicly visible, whereas only registrants can come into the KikoChat space. So let's see, I want to show you a few other things about the calendar. Filtering is a nice feature, right? So there's a lot of themes. They're all listed on the left here. But let's say I just want to find the AirC interaction sessions. This little button here, the eye, will toggle. So now everything is off, and I can click AirC interactions, and there are just those two sessions. So it makes it a lot easier to navigate, because there's quite a lot going on, as you all can see. There are other views for this calendar too. I like the week view, for example. We're not looking at, this is this week. So here we are in and then tomorrow, here's next week. It gets much busier, but you can get a sense of how all the things overlap and see the flow over time of each of these. So some of these themes have multiple sessions, some only have one or perhaps two. Let's see what else. I want to show you how to add things to your own personal calendar, right? Which might be useful. You might want to work through the calendar and find those items you want to attend. So in addition to signing up, there's this share button here. And when you click that, you can get access to a link to add that particular session to your calendar. So you can do that for individual sessions. The other thing you can do is add the entire calendar to yours, or portions of it. So you click over here on this blue square, the hamburger, and then you go to preferences. You'll see iCalendar feeds. And here there's a link to how to subscribe to these feeds, and you can copy either an individual theme calendar, or down at the bottom, we have all calendars, and that will give you a way to export this entire Team Up calendar into whatever calendar tool you use, Google, Apple, Outlook, etc. And let me see, I believe that we have covered everything we need to, at least for now. Again, it's easy to get a hold of me. And I think we have a little bit of time maybe to take some questions about this. Maybe some things have come into the chat as well.
Rob, thank you very much. Oh, Ben, sorry. It was useful. And I would like to ask, is it possible in Kiko chat to write at the same time to everyone, or we have to search one by one per person?
Yes, it is possible. So there is a chat function within Kiko chat. I think the challenge here is, will people be monitoring it? But you see here is direct message and group chat. So this does send a message to everyone if you do that as a direct message. But the other thing I think that may be a little more workable is to use the discussion board, at least if it isn't something that you want an immediate response to, because we have people from all around the world. So if you're looking to have a general conversation on a particular topic, I would recommend that.
I think who is attending today, it's about more than 150 people, and I believe this is a so cool human resource. We are together for passion on the same topic, and I am so happy that we have a lot of people. And if there will be after the program some group or Google Meetup or I don't know, something where we all will be like united, I think it will be so cool because we can share our practices, the information, projects, and so on. This was my comment. Thank you very much and all the best from Georgia. Welcome to my country. We have wine, good wine. Yeah, if you like wine, this is a wine country. Khinkali, it's like dumplings. So if you will be in Georgia, just remember me. Just say I'm very easy. I will be your guide, guys. Be sure that you will enjoy my city.
We can maybe zoom in and find you here.
It's Tbilisi. I could not attend myself there. It's a Black Sea country like Georgia is there. It's me. I think only one person.
In any case, let's see if we have some other questions. But I did want to point out as well. So there is a map, and all of these tools will remain available after the workshop. So yes, you could set up something new, but you could also continue using the discussion board. Do we have some questions in chat? Let me see here. Who loves wine? People talking about time.
It's me from Georgia because we are white country. We all love wine.
We only have a few minutes left, so let's make sure that if people do have any other questions about this, we can try to answer them now.
Ben, I have a question. This is Jay. I noticed some people have pictures on their icons and other people are just blank. Is there a way to put your picture there so people know who you are just visually?
Of course there is. And when you first come into Kiko chat, I think you're on a different screen. You're on the you're on this one, and I think it may prompt you. It may say if you haven't filled everything out in your profile, and then you click participate now. But either way, you go up here in that screen or in the main one we were looking at before, here's edit my profile, and that's where you can add a picture. There are a bunch of other questions. We're not really expecting people to fill out any of this or asking you to pay attention to that, but at least you can choose a file for your picture. And you can also, this is where you put in your geographic information to be shown on the map as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. And with that, Ben's available during the whole of the workshop to work with you and to help you if you have questions. And he will put again in the chat the access for getting hold of him, the help. And I think that'd be wonderful. I'd like to then bring this to a close, the plenary. This is the first plenary of a long session. And I would like to thank the keynote speakers and the panelists and you, the participants, for your contributions. We do acknowledge the support of NSF, GOOS, and IODE for this workshop. And I would just open my arms and say we look forward to joining together for a productive 2 weeks and an opportunity to meet people and to work together. And with that, I'd like to close the session and thank you all for participating.